wanted to be a writer since I was born. I was thinking the other day that, wow, I grew up to be exactly what I wanted to be. And I wonder how many people can say that.
Victoria, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Black Women Talk Work. I'm very excited to speak with you.
And I'm excited to be here with you.
You know, I know that you've been quoted saying that I've always knew I would become an author, even as I was taking an unlikely path to that destination. What was it about writing that made you so sure that being an author was destined for your future?
I've wanted to be a writer since I was born. I was thinking the other day that, wow, I grew up to be exactly what I wanted to be. And I wonder how many people can say that. I always tell people I wrote my very first I loved to read as a child. That was the first thing. And then when I was 7 years old, I wrote my very first masterpiece. And a lot of people say you cannot write a masterpiece at 7, but you can if you plagiarize. And so I wrote something called Betty and the Witch, with a little girl that had a red uniform that she wore to school every day. She had 3 bears who were her brothers and 3 pigs who were her sisters. And so I put that together in a play. My parents gave it to my teacher, and she had the entire 2nd grade perform it as a play. And that I didn't know what was happening. I was only 7, but that vowed what was inside of me. And I took an unlikely path because I didn't grow up knowing any authors or meeting authors like people can today. But it was always inside of me. I knew I was going to be a writer. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew I was going to be a writer.
That's a beautiful story. And they always say that, like, you don't know what's, especially as a child, you don't know what's possible if you don't see it.
Yeah.
So I think your point
that's
about
what
not
happened with
authors.
me. I had this dream that obviously came from God only because it wasn't around people around me, though my parents loved to read. They always had books. But I didn't see any authors, but I had the dream to become what I was reading, but I didn't even see anybody that looked like me in books. And so I certainly didn't see anybody out there writing books. And so I took a different path, a more corporate path, but never lost that desire to write. And in the 1990s, early 90s, when all of these Black writers came out, I saw what was possible.
And actually, I want to dive a little bit deeper there. So after about a decade in corporate and then another decade of running your own business, I believe, what moment did you decide you were ready to pursue this dream of being an author?
So it's interesting because I kept saying I was going to be an author from the time I got married. And my husband, for a wedding gift, brought us an Apple IIe. And if you remember those computers, they were the first home computers. They were as big as your office. It was just crazy. And every year I said I was going to write, and I never did. And I always used the excuse of life got in the way, but it was really a fear. It was really a fear. And every year my husband said, you said you're going to write. You said you were going to write. He updated the computers and everything. 16 years passed. And a couple of things happened in 1997. One was my husband said to me, okay, I'm not asking you anymore. I'm not going to ask you, but one day you're going to be 80 years old and you're going to be sitting on somebody's porch and you're going to be rocking in that chair saying, wow, I didn't even try. So that kind of triggered and scared me. And then that was also the time when their Black authors were coming on the shelf. Terry McMillan, but it was really an author by the name of Yolanda Joe. I saw her on one of the very first BET programs back in the late 90s, and she had just had a book come out called The Falling Leaves of Ivy. I ran to the bookstore the next morning, got it from Walden Books, read that book, and I said, okay, now with what my husband was saying, with reading Yolanda Joe's book, now I can do it. And that was in 97.
And, I think the point about your husband and him calling that out, like, I think it's so important to have people in your life who will kind of
Yeah.
hold you accountable and hold that mirror up to you when you need it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And he did it every year. Every year he was like, is the year? And I was like, I promise you this is the year. And he said, you said that last year. But then he said, I'm not asking you anymore. This is it. 16 years. I'm
Mm.
not asking you anymore. But just don't look at me when we're 80 years old and you're in the rocking chair saying, oh, I wish I had tried. And that scared me. That
Yeah.
just really, really scared me.
Can I ask, do you, when you look back at that, 16 years, do you have any regrets on taking the path that you took to get to this moment where you're literally a week out from publishing your first solo historical novel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because there are times when I think I wish I had started sooner, but I think my novels sometimes are richer because of my corporate history. I
Mm-hmm.
think they're richer because I know what it was like to be a woman, a Black woman in the workplace, to excel in corporate America and the challenges that came along with that. Those are understandings that I wouldn't have had if I had gone straight into the creative side of my life. I'm also glad that I had all those years of corporate experience because writing is also a business. Sometimes we think it's just the creative part of putting the words on a page,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all very exciting, but that's half of it. You have to get the books to move off the shelf. And so I have that experience as well. So there are times when I wish it was earlier. And because I didn't write my first novel till I was 42 years old, and I wish it were earlier, but I think it was when it was supposed to happen.
I love that. So before we get into your upcoming novel, I know that you previously co-authored New York Times bestsellers, The Personal Librarian, which highlights the life of J.P. Morgan's personal librarian, and The First Lady, which details the story of civil rights activist Mary McLeod Bethune and her partnership with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Both of these novels focus on amplifying the stories and voices of Black women who were kind of in the background, but played pivotal roles in history. Your new novel, Harlem Rhapsody, follows the same trend, bringing to light the story of Jessie Fauset, the Black woman and writer who essentially ignited the Harlem Renaissance. There are a few things I want to dissect here. Why the focus on Black women in history? Like, what is it that you think there is to learn from the experiences of these Black women who had significant impact, but their names are rarely mentioned or shouted from the rooftops like they deserve?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and the answer is in your question. These are significant women
Mm-hmm.
whose names have been lost in the folds of history. And their names should stand up right next to people we know. In the book I just wrote, Jessie Redmon Fauset should be right next to W.E.B. Du Bois. Should
Mm.
be right next to him. But the women have been lost in history, and especially right now, where our history sometimes we're being told it's not important, being told that we can erase it because it doesn't matter. This is kind of like my activism, using the art and the gift that God gave me. This is what I can use, my words on a page, to bring to life people who were so pivotal and so important. For people who love to read and write, some of this wouldn't have happened without Jessie Redmon Fauset. It's amazing. So we stand on her shoulders, and I want people to know.
And you kind of alluded to it there, but when you think about it within the context of today's like cultural, social, political environment, what is it that you want writers to take from Harlem Rhapsody?
I want people to see this woman with her persistence and her tenacity. She was the first Black woman to graduate from Cornell University, the first Black woman to be Phi Beta Kappa. She was actually the second, but her whole life, she died thinking she was the first one. They didn't have the internet, so she didn't know. She was the first, this trailblazer who, even though she never saw any other women in the room, she hardly saw Black people in the room, she persisted. And because of her, we know about writers like Langston Hughes, County Cullen, Jean Toomer, and Zora Neale Hurston. We wouldn't have known them without her.
And I want to dive a little bit into the book, and I don't want to give up too
Yeah.
much away,
Yeah.
but amid Jessie's affair with W.E.B. Du Bois, who also happens to be her boss at the Crisis magazine. Harlem is flourishing. It's the 1920s. It's a place of Black pride, Black art, and Black creativity. In many ways, this time in history really marks like a turning point for Black Americans to not only own our stories, but to own writing and publishing our stories. Can you talk a little bit about just like the power of writing during this time period as it's captured in the book and how it was kind of used as a tool for liberation for Black people in Harlem?
Yeah, that's a very good question because the Harlem Renaissance started only about 50 years after emancipation. When you think about it, so these were first and second generation college educated Black people. In fact, they were saying the literacy rate was so low at that point among Black people, but with the Harlem Renaissance and writers coming out, the Black literacy rate increased because Black people wanted to be able to read the Crisis magazine. They wanted to read Langston Hughes' next poem. They wanted to do that. So that was a turning point for us in terms of literacy. We gave Black people something to read. And one of the things that W.E.B. Du Bois wanted to do with the Crisis magazine was he wanted it to be an activist periodical. He always said that art should be propaganda, that art should be used as a way to expose the Black community to the white community in the most positive way, because the white community had only one impression of us at that point, that we were all slaves and servants. That's the only way they saw us. And so he wanted to expose Black people as this educated group. He was the first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard University. He wanted to show these Black people that were not only college educated, but getting advanced degrees. He wanted to show white people that we could come together in the stage of art. Look at our literature. Look at our theatrical productions. Look at our music. All of that was to create a world that white people had never seen. And that's what the Harlem Renaissance was. It was the first time in America where there was Black pride. Because before then, we were enslaved. Right after that, we had Reconstruction for a little period of time, but Jim Crow came in. So while this was going on in Harlem, in this little corner of the world with Black pride, there were still lynchings all across America. There was still the race riots. The race riot in Tulsa is in my novel. All of that was happening on top. It was really an interesting combination of this area of Black pride and Black culture in your clothing and your music and your words. Yet in the Crisis magazine and at the NAACP offices, they would hang a flag out that said another man was lynched today. So it was an interesting time, and they just wanted to use art as a way to try to bring the races together.
And as you were diving into the story of Jessie as a Black woman writer, were there parts of her that you felt really connected with, that really resonated with you?
Yeah, somebody interviewed me last week, somebody who's known me for my whole 28-year career. And he said as he was reading it, he was like, nobody else could have written this story. This is Victoria Christopher Murray. I was so excited when Cyrus said that. He said he read it the whole time. He was like, this is Victoria. But there was so much about her. Like the way she wanted to be a writer her entire life, just like me. The way she wrote the very first novel featuring Black middle-class characters. And that's what I write about. And it's amazing to me, as a writer who's been writing 28 years, who's been writing all kinds of novels. This is my first historical solo, but I was writing contemporary novels all these years about the Black middle class, that I never asked myself who was the first person to write one of these, because I would have discovered her a lot sooner. There was just so much about her and her love for words and her love for literature. And if I didn't have to eat and sleep and do other things, all I would do in my life is read and write. And I believe that's what Jessie did.
And what do you hope aspiring writers who are listening to this episode and who will read the book, what do you hope they take away from it?
I hope that they will take pride. I hope people will say, wow, this Black woman did all of that. I wouldn't know Langston Hughes' name if it wasn't for her. I wouldn't know County Cullen's name if it wasn't for her. I hope they'll go out and do a deeper dive into finding about Jessie. She wrote 4 novels. She was the most prolific writer during the Harlem Renaissance. I hope people will go out and read her novels. I just want a renewed interest in this woman who should never have been erased.
Oh, that's powerful. And you've done it essentially throughout this entire conversation, but I want to close on this last question of, as you wrap, can you tell our audience, why is this the book to have on your 2025 reading list? Because it's January. People are still building out like, okay, this is what my Goodreads is going to look like for the year. This is my list. Why is Harlem Rhapsody a book that needs to be on that list?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I would say this. If it wasn't for the woman in Harlem Rhapsody, you wouldn't have those other books for the rest of your year. You would not have them. She is the cornerstone. She is the foundation of Black literature. And so you have to start at the beginning. Start with the first one. So as you're building a list of 11 other books and novels, you wouldn't even have them without Jessie Redmon Fauset.
Look, that was it.
You wouldn't have them.
I love that. Now, when can listeners go pick up the novel in stores?
So it will be out. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. Next Tuesday, February 4th. And so it'll be available everywhere. They can pre-order right now. Go to Amazon and pre-order the novel so you will have it the day that it comes out. And I'm very excited. I'll be on an extensive tour, but I'm so excited because she's just one of the most important women in history, Black or white. She's one of the most important women in history.
And how can people keep up with you and your work?
Yes. So my website is my name, VictoriaChristopherMurray.com. So my tour schedule is on there. People can go read the first chapter of Harlem Rhapsody or any of my other novels and find out. And on social media, I'm Victoria Christopher Murray everywhere.
So before I let you go, I want to do a really quick speed round. Now, I always call it a speed round, but you can take your time. First question. What's the worst professional advice you've ever received?
Oh, man, the worst. I don't know if it was professional advice, but, this is going to be easy. Oh, and it was the most depressing. My first agent, she wasn't my agent at the point. She read the first 50 pages of my novel, and she was like, girl, we're about to make some money. This is a good book. 2 years later, I didn't have a book deal. And so that was a hard thing. And it was at the beginning. After that, I didn't trust anything anybody said.
So it taught you to be cautious.
It taught me to be cautious. And it taught me that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. So even if that wasn't bad advice, but in something that didn't come true, there was a lesson in it. There was a lesson that this was going to be a marathon. And because I did not expect the longevity, how long things took. But I've had a long career now. So.
And what's on the flip side, the best advice or professional advice you've received?
It's going to be the advice for anybody. Just don't give up. Sometimes, there were so many points when this got tough. I started out on a trajectory going up. In 2007, the digital market came and changed the game. It closed borders, bookstores, everything. And the trajectory started going down. And at that point, a lot of people jumped ship. I would have jumped ship. I just didn't know what else I could go do. And if I had jumped ship, I wouldn't have had New York Times bestselling books, 5 of my novels or movies on Lifetime. I wouldn't have had any of that. I would have stopped 3 feet away from the gold. So don't stop 3 feet from gold.
Coffee or tea?
Tea. All day.
Early mornings or late nights?
Afternoons.
Okay.
I do. Yesterday I was checking with my assistant and I was like, what? This morning I am not an early morning person at all. And then I might be, but when I hear late nights, especially for writers, there are writers that write till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. That ain't me either. when it gets dark, I'm thinking I'm supposed to go to sleep. So, but if I had to choose one, it would be more towards night because I'm not getting up. I'm not like my publicist has learned, man, we got to get Victoria on this early flight. What do we have to do to bribe her to get up?
That makes me all the more grateful that you're up with me at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m. I'm very grateful.
You saw me last night. I was like, it says 8 o'clock.
Thank you so much. Second to last one, personal power color.
Red.
Love it. And your favorite book, podcast, or tech tool that has helped you in your career.
Ooh, my favorite book that's helped me in my career is a book called On Writing, written by Stephen King. And I recommend that to everybody. The first half of the book is his inspirational story. The second half are just some key tips to write just basic good books. So that's the first thing. My tools, I haven't used the desktop since 2005. And I haven't used the laptop since 2010. I write on an iPad. And now it looks like a regular, it's the big one and with the keyboard. But that was because I was traveling so much. And when the iPads came out in 2010, you didn't have to take them out of your bag at the airport. You know how you have to take out computers? You didn't have to. And the reason that was important to me is 2 TSA people had dropped my laptop twice. And I just didn't know if my friends had enough bail money. Because if I ever lost my book, and so that was the thing. And I've always written. It's been the best thing for me. I write on my iPad. And my best writing program is Scrivener, not Word. So people can look that up. Excellent for writers.
Victoria, thank you so much for speaking with me this morning. This was such a great conversation, and I'm excited for the world to experience and read Harlem Rhapsody. It's an incredible book.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.